Okay, before the next one of these, I think I'm just gonna get a haircut because the beanies, they're starting to make me look like a doorknob, okay? Friggin' ding dong, anybody home, leave a message at the tone looking ass.
Please record your message.
Wait, what the fuck? Welcome back to the lounge and whatever. Jeffrey, you and I need to have a talk. If you keep up to date with gaming, you probably know who Geoff Keighley is. Keighley is a games journalist and TV presenter who's created ever more popular events around video games, his magnum opus probably being the Game Awards, aka the Gaming Oscars. I like Geoff a lot. He hosts his own stuff, he has a passion that clearly shines through, he has a high production value for everything he does. I don't really have any negative feelings towards him as a person or towards his events. Aside from the fact that he spells his name like a damn crackhead. What is this, a bad rapper stage name? I've had enough. Anyone who spells it Geoff is immediately untrustworthy to me. But you know, other than that, I'm fine with him. But despite all of that, and despite the fact that he gets big names to show up to said events, I always walk away from them feeling a little bit disappointed. Even the ones I like and start off going, wow, this can't possibly go wrong, they start to peter out as they go on, and it just winds up never being as good as it could be. Geoff has 3 major events in the year now: Summer Game Fest, Gamescom, and the Game Awards. If we look at the Summer Game Fest kickoff show without the pre-show, we can see that it ran for about 2 hours. Gamescom without the pre-show also around 2 hours, and then the Game Awards without the pre-show was a whopping 3 hours. These shows are massive, and Keighley ups the production and the staging and the ideas every year, every conference, which is admirable and does lead to tons of improvements, but the core of his philosophy on these events is a hindrance to them in my opinion, or at least it becomes a hindrance when all 3 of the shows have the exact same philosophy. Geoff loves to tout his events as the only time that all of the big publishers are under one roof. They're not at competing E3 conferences, they're all in the same event showing off their products in unison. Now, that's a really nice sentiment, of course, but the issue that you get with that is that everyone gets something at these events, but no one gets enough. For example, if we look at the last couple of Sony events or the last Xbox E3, they felt tailored to specific audiences. And I don't just mean that as in the Sony events were for PlayStation fans and the Xbox events were for Xbox fans. I'm talking about the fact that most of these games fell into similar or adjacent genres and stuck to mainly AAA titles with a few smaller titles sprinkled in. Even though some games were there to grab the attention of a slightly different audience, there was a much better focus with these conferences. Maybe one that alienated fans of smaller or more niche games, but given how the conferences were set up, that was kind of to be expected anyways, and smaller announcements always show up throughout the year regardless. These events were clearly designed to show off the biggest games in their respective vaults. That was what was expected, and so when it delivers, it feels like a great conference. On the other hand, Geoff's conferences always feel like they're stretched way too thin. Look at the games that showed up at the first hour of the Summer Game Fest kickoff show. Boom, 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 boom. Now compare that to one of Sony's recent showcases. I'm not even talking about the quality of the games necessarily. Sony has less frequent events and likes to have some heavy hitters for its showcase, so it's not Geoff's fault that he can't get something like the reveal of the new Spider-Man or God of War. But there's a sense of cohesion here, which also means you know exactly what you're gonna get out of a typical PlayStation event. It's less scattershot and it's got better pacing. In making an event like this, narrowing down is usually better than being too broad. You don't need to show every publisher, every genre, every size of game in one conference. I like that Geoff gets an audience input before and after the shows. He tries to find out what people liked and disliked. He's very open about it. Clearly he's okay with taking criticism and has a lot of patience for idiots that spam him with the same dumb questions and requests that he has no control over. Oh, put GTA 6 in there next time. Buddy, you think GTA 6 trailers grow on trees? He can't go out and pluck one off and throw it in there. How does he have any say in when GTA 6 is shown? You're a goofball. However, despite the fact that Geoff is open to feedback, it does feel like he has a bad habit of trying to expand outwards at all times and not taking the time to remove things that jam up the pacing. Geoff Keighley is definitely a bit of a showman. He's very attached to the work that he's made, and that's very understandable. But it's just as beneficial, if not more, to remove things that don't work than it is to add things that might work. A lot of these events feel like they're being padded out for runtime, even though a shorter, more concise time frame would make people walk away happier. The many talking heads that wind up and say very little most of the time especially can be cut out. It makes sense to have people on stage at the Game Awards, but when it's just a video or a stilted conversation, it takes away from the pacing. If getting rid of stuff like this gets SGF or Gamescom to under 1.5 or even 1 hour, good, that's ideal. I'm fine with the ad type sections because if you expect something this high budget to be made, something's gotta pay for it, and we get this for free on YouTube and Twitch, so people complaining about the ads just haven't taken a second to think before they speak. This is really the best case scenario. At least it's game-centric ads at a game-centric showcase. But it baffles me how many niche games show up at Opening Night Live or Summer Games Fest kickoff when they're just part of bigger events. I mean, there's other conferences coming up very shortly that are going to show off tons of different types of games. I absolutely love indies. Anyone who watches my channel knows that, but if you're going to have an indie showcase right after the kickoff, why would you have a bunch of indies at the kickoff event? It just bloats what you're doing. These later showcases are more relaxed and laid back, so having interesting announcements that are not blood-pumpingly hype is very fitting for those. But the main events have this grand, massive feeling to them, and when it starts to slow down and show a bunch of smaller games in the middle, it just kind of conflicts with the rest of what you're doing. I love watching these showcases, but I've never once been interested all the way through, and I've never not been tired afterwards, and I say that as somebody with a pretty broad interest in games. Maybe my biggest problem with Keighley's format though is that every event feels the exact same. They all have the same philosophy I mentioned earlier, every game company under one roof, but when there's 3 of these events a year, they start to lose that novelty, and the takeaway you're left with is just, yeah, these events are kind of all over the place, aren't they? They're all Keighley on a stage presenting one thing after another with some cameo appearances, a few big reveals, some tiny teases, some gameplay showcases, rinse and repeat for a few hours, and you're done. Compare that to something like E3 and you get some conferences that are a little bit different sometimes, and at the very least you get different people hosting every single event. The Game Awards has a bit more eloquence and a couple of really good ideas that I'll get to in a sec, but other than that, they all feel the exact same. I think with how many events Keighley is now hosting, there's gotta be a few shakeups to the process in order for it to be a bit more interesting. Summer Game Fest feels like something that should be a lot more interactive. It needs to feel more like a festival than a series of conferences. It would be really nice if this could turn into a bigger, more well-promoted version of Steam Next Fest for all consoles. I feel like that's what it's trying to be, but it's not quite there yet. It needs to create a real virtual rival to E3 where there's timed demos and maybe the site can feature booths where you can click on an interesting game, and there would be a recorded developer talk about the game that played as you tried it out or you saw footage of it. There could be raffles and prizes. Make it feel like a real virtual game festival and put all of your efforts into that. I know that Summer Game Fest has a lot of that stuff already, but it feels like background set dressing to the main kickoff event. If I was in this position, I think I would personally ditch the kickoff event idea entirely and just make it all about the playability aspect. Try and get devs to make like summer themed images of their games like Sony did with their studios for Halloween and Christmas, and have those be available as profile pictures on your console. I feel like a lot more could be done on the fest side of things if the focus was put there instead of another Keighley live event. It would just be something different. Make Summer Game Fest more about celebrating the now and playing a bit of the near future. Doing that lets you save a lot of potential reveals for Gamescom, which you can keep roughly the same as you have right now, but given the clout that Keighley's gotten in the past few years, plus de-emphasizing Summer Game Fest kickoff like I mentioned, you could pack this opening night live with a lot more consistency. And then with the Game Awards, I think that event needs to start trying to readjust its priorities into celebrating this year and not promoting the next few years. It's called the Game Awards. It's the time where we're supposed to recognize the great work of people who released a product in the last 365 days. And it always felt weird to me that the awards felt like the second priority at these events. I like the fact that the night ends with Game of the Year and not a one more thing big reveal. But the time given for speeches is so little. Half the awards are given out in the pre-show, a bunch of the awards are rattled off in the span of 30 seconds to give room for the next 40 minutes of announcements, and then that process is repeated over and over. It just feels a bit weird. My absolute favorite thing about the Game Awards is just before the Game of the Year announcement, we get this beautiful orchestrated medley of all of the nominees, some of which don't even have the best music, but it always sounds incredible on stage with that more epic flair. Things melt together so well, it's beautiful, it's the best way this event honors the games that came out this year, and we need more stuff like that. There's tons of live music throughout the show, which is a nice touch, and I love the feel and the pageantry and the theatric nature of this event, but I need more focus on the nominees. Get a good editor who can take these nominees and create a bunch of transitions in between them to create a nice little clip that represents the best action games of the year or the best indie games. Give more time for the awards to be presented, let everyone come up on stage and give a thank you, let them talk for a bit longer, and just reduce the number of announcements. I know everyone loves announcements and wants announcements. I want announcements. It might sound crazy that I keep saying to put less of them in, but ultimately we're all aware that the pacing in these events is never as good as some of the legendary conferences over the years. We all know that there are 10, 20 20, 30 games in every show that we could live without, and we all feel like this 3-show idea is spreading itself a little bit thin. And I think that while it'd initially feel like a step backwards if these changes were announced, shorter run times, less reveals, and even less events in general, we'd actually wind up with better overall products in the end. If the gears can be tightened a little bit, I honestly think that no one in the industry can make a better overall gaming showcase than Geoff Keighley. I have mad respect for him and where he's come from, and he seems genuinely so interested in making his stuff better, but I honestly think that the biggest step forward is not to increase, it's to reduce. And that's frankly a tough thing to wrap your head around on something that you worked so hard on, so I understand why it's taking a while for this to maybe happen. But the second that I see the announcement that the next event is going to be 30 minutes shorter than the last one, I'm going to be way more excited than if it was 30 minutes longer, I'll say that much. I really hope he finds a way to shake things up going forward. These things have a lot of potential, and I just really enjoy watching them even though they're not perfect right now, so if they can be tightened up, that'll be a great experience. Are you guys fans of Geoff Keighley's conferences? Do you feel like they desperately need a change? Let me know in the comments. Like to subscribe to like the video. Confusion tactics, it'll work, don't worry. I'll see you next time. Peace.